Welcome to Cash Talk, the podcast where we delve into the depths of finance, business, and life itself. I'm your host, John Cachia, a multi-award-winning wealth advisor with a passion for empowering ambitious Australians to confidently achieve financial freedom. Hey everyone, before we get started, this is a quick reminder that everything in this podcast is of a general nature and nothing has been tailored to your personal circumstances. So please seek personal financial advice before acting on this information. Hello everyone and welcome back to Cash Talk, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, currently residing in the UK, Dr Philip Courtenay, the founder of Humans and Money, who's really about helping people to transform their lives and live better lives. So Phil, thanks for jumping on. How are you, mate?
Good. Yeah, early start here, 6:35. So bear with me for the first 5 minutes of this, get into the swing of things. All good. Thanks for having me, John.
That's it. Now, you were in Australia for a little bit, weren't you?
I've got an Australian wife, so the whole family trek over there at least once a year. She's Melbourneian, but we tend to be in Sydney, Melbourne, as much as we can. So yeah, there for a couple of months over Christmas. Good time of year to come.
That's it. And tell me a little bit more about yourself. Obviously, one being a doctor, maybe like a doctor of what? Like obviously you're not a doctor of medicine. And the second part is Humans and Money. What's it all about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm not the doctor you'd want on the plane when someone screams for for one of them. Unless you've got, a lack of control around money, I'm not the guy that you want running down the aisle to help you.
Yeah.
I'm a doctor of financial decision making. Basically, my postdoctorate is in understanding what drives people consciously. What are the things that like education and trust, things that we know are driving us, and unconsciously, what are the things that actually lie there under the surface that influence a lot of our financial decisions, but we can't see, and we may not even know them about ourselves. So that's what my kind of academic, my doctorate's in. My background, I used to work in marketing and strategy, heading up a team for wealth management business there. I left to set up Humans and Money about 5.5 years ago, and I now consult speaking and training with financial services brands. So a lot of those are financial planning businesses, investment management businesses, insurers. I've done some work in Sydney, for example, speaking at a big business there. But all of the work I do is around helping individuals or businesses understand what's really influencing financial decisions. And then once we've done that, how do we build a better experience and create better financial behavior in light of it? And that's everything that I'm kind of, that's my, I guess my purpose now is all around that.
And it's really interesting, Phil, because me and you obviously connected. Just for everyone today, we connected on LinkedIn. He's on one side of the pond, I'm on the other side of the pond. But, I think we both kind of really connected around how we view money and how we view the ability to kind of have people live fulfilling lives. And, off the record, me and Phil have had a couple of chats in regards to really what's our burning desire. And our burning desire for people is to make impactful change and for them to live those more fulfilling lives. So, you've gone really right down the kind of academic route and obviously now using it in practice across businesses and whatnot. And, from my own journey, it probably wasn't as academic. Yeah, I do have some certificates to put on the wall, but, mine's really been on the trenches and seeing clients, hundreds, if not thousands of them over the, 21 years, about how much their mindset, their behaviors impact, essentially the success of their life. And I'm not just talking about just money. Money is the vehicle to enable these things to happen, but around that. So I want to kind of now deep dive a little bit into some, of these techniques and some strategies. And a lot of people like listen to this podcast at different stages in their life, and we'll try and cover a little bit. But one of the common ones that I see, Phil, where a lot of people have maybe the greatest intentions to want to change. Like hey, John, I'm all ears. I want to change. I want to be financially free. I want to do all of these things. But there's this sense of like, I want to. And then when it comes to a little bit of like the actual execution of actually making the change and executing on what needs to be done, that there's a bit of like apprehension And in some cases, they put their head back in the sand and go back to their old ways. Yeah. What's actually happening here with these individuals? And these are some people that have, like, what I would say, like, have a bite of the cherry 3 or 4, 5 times in like a 10-year period. Um, and then some act, but then some never act. Yeah. What's happening
Mhm.
here?
Obviously different for every person, but the principle is pretty common, right? And if we go back to kind of basics, what's happening generally when we try and change our behavior? I think about it as these kind of two forces working against each other. So if you think of, say, a hot air balloon going up in the air, it's powered by fuel, right? And we think of that fuel as motivation. Rarely is motivation an issue because why wouldn't someone want to feel financially secure, financially free, live a better life, have, be prosperous, all of those things. So it's not necessarily about increasing, the amount of hot air in the balloon, the amount of fuel going in. The problem tends to be the things that are holding us back. And if you think in that hot air balloon analogy, and forgive me, I talk in I talk in analogies often.
The audience is used to me talking in analogies
Great.
too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like
The
half hieroglyphs.
imagine that air balloon being held back down by tethers, right? And you can put as much fuel into that balloon as possible, but if it's still held back, if it's attached to the ground, it's not going anywhere. Those tethers are what we need to think about. They're the things that hold people back, and I think of those as three separate things: emotions, things like anxiety. That might be anxiety at the prospect of working with a financial advisor, which is very fair. And actually, two-thirds of individuals, and this has been shown in Australia and the Netherlands, another couple of countries now as well, but the majority of adults feel anxious at the prospect of engaging with a financial professional. Right? Even someone that's clearly tasked to help them, that's the role of that person. They're anxious at the thought of it. So on one hand, you've got this potentially kind of anxiety around investing and dealing with the what feels like a very risky world of stock markets. On the other hand, you've got anxiety around getting help. So these emotional tethers, and it might be a lack of control, feeling like you're going to lose control. If I've been managing my own money for 10 years, and actually I'm thinking, like, I really need help, but if I go to a financial advisor, John, for example, does that mean I'm not really in control of what I'm doing anymore? And actually, maybe I feel a bit guilty about that. I'll give you a great example of a an interview I had, a very kind of in-depth interview with a tax partner at one of the big four accountants in the UK. And she said when it comes to her work decisions, she was clearly very, very good at her job and very successful financially. When it comes to her work decisions, it's very easy to make financial decisions, financial changes, and recommend the right thing to do. And she thinks about it very logically. When it comes to her personal decisions, she sort of gasped and threw her hands up in the air. She's like, it's illogical. I just can't do it. And there was a real sense of guilt around that as well, right? Because she said, I'm a chartered accountant. Why can't I manage my own financial affairs? So often people feel like they should be able to do something themselves. But you've got, there's some examples. You've got this mix of stuff that we'll call emotions, right? And they might be individual emotions, or they might be influenced by what we call social norms. So what are other people doing? If none of my mates need help, why do I? Kind of thing. The second one of these tethers I think of as around effort, and that might be physical effort. So literally, the time it's going to take to speak to someone, to make a change, to be doing the right things. And it might be often cognitive effort. By that I mean the mental effort of deciding, of figuring stuff out, of making a change. And a couple of, if we think about that one, the mental effort of making financial change, finances are uncertain. All right, we've already said that. So there's a lot of what we call ambiguity that goes with that. Am I speaking to the right person? Where do I even start to make a change? Is this the right thing? There are 101 things I could be doing. We're in an age now where we're bombarded by information constantly. So it's not really a question of can I get the information? It's like, how do I distill that and actually take action? And that can be really overwhelming. And there's this concept called cognitive load. I don't want to get too theoretical in this podcast. I appreciate I've chucked some of those words in already, but in essence, we can only deal with so much information. And if the decision feels too big, too overwhelming, too difficult to figure out, then it stops us. It puts us in this sense of not
Analysis
necessarily,
paralysis.
yeah, kind
Analysis
of not
paralysis.
necessarily conscious avoidance, but like I say, just paralyzed by how do I take the next step? So that effort, you've got talking about emotions and effort, and a lot of that is kind of mental effort. What do I do next? How do I do it? Where do I go? How do I distill this information? To your point, to take action, and that's the tough bit, right? You can have the best intentions, but there's this intention action gap that we need to address. And then the third one, these three E's, I call them. The third one is economics. These economic tethers, and that might be cost, just not seeing value in making a change, taking advice, or or anything that might take some economic cost. And there's also the risk around that as well. And to be kind of very simple and direct, people worry about whether their money will be safe, and whether the bad media that they see online around investing, Ponzi schemes, bad advisors, whatever that might be, is that going to happen to them? Is there an economic risk to them of getting a bad service and actually wasting their money, or worse, losing their money? And that's the thing that's often not directly addressed, actually, and people don't like to voice, but is certainly there from research. So you've got this motivation, this fuel that's, to your point, often already there, right? We do need to hone in on that thing. We can talk about that later, perhaps. But once we've got that motivation, the question should be, well, how do we let that happen? How do we let people take action? And the answer is removing these three tethers holding people back: the emotions, the effort, and the economic tethers that are stopping them from taking the steps that they need to.
It's very interesting because, like, obviously, I see a lot of this, yeah, and sometimes it's not even the opportunity to kind of walk through the processes per se. Yeah, it's like it might be just bumping into someone at a local coffee shop and they're saying, "Oh, yeah, I heard you're a financial advisor," and then there's a little dabble here, and then 6 months later, no, I should come and see ya. And there's this, and I can see like there's these patterns forming. Yeah. And like some people, it was like 15 years ago where they first came and there's still no action. Yeah. And
Right,
there's
right.
probably, there's probably a nice approach, which is, oh, I've got to come see you. There's some of that. I probably get that. Yeah. Which is just a nice gesture to say. It's not like I'm going out with a sign and saying, "Oh, come see me at Thriving Wealth." Please don't think that I'm like that.
Yeah.
But yes, I think there's a level of motivation. It's like the whole when you speak to that person often and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I've got to get to the gym." 6 months later, oh, I've got to get to the gym. Oh, I got to, and you're right. Like, obviously, there's the economics around, getting a personal trainer potentially, or getting a gym membership, or getting that's the economic side. Yeah. And then we've got the other element in regards to not just obviously the economics around it, but, that kind of social pressure and social stigma around,
Mhm.
oh, what I can't do it myself. I need to go get someone to kind of
Yeah.
train me. So, like, yeah, I can see how this is also very prevalent in regards to other areas in people's lives and how that kind of way of thinking converts to that. But what's very interesting is the clients who do really well, I don't know how to kind of frame this, but they're like, obviously, they're motivated. They're usually successful people in other areas of their life. They surround themselves with experts. Yeah. They're very coachable. Okay. They want to listen to professionals. They want to they understand that, Phil's got X amount of years of experience. Like, there's no way that I've got the time and effort to learn as much as he do. So if he's willing to pay, like if I can pay for his knowledge over it, I want that. Yeah. So there's a
Sure, sure.
different, there's a very different view from the people who take that motivation one step further and actually execute, which is around, hey, listen, the value for me is one, the knowledge and the time. John's got 21 years of worth of experience. He's got 40,000 hours. He's seen this over and over and over again. I want to pay for less mistakes. I want to pay for certainty. I want that economics. Bang, makes sense. if John cost me X amount of dollars, I'm going to make 3 times as much because I'm going to go and they convert their energy. Does that make sense? Rather than,
Hmm.
and then I think it's the social stigma is I see a lot of people that are successful. I'm not going to say not care about everyone else because a lot of people do say, "Oh, I don't care what other people think." Like,
Sure.
that you know probably the actual academia around this, but there's usually an underlying thing around your social reputation. Yeah. And I was reading the book of The Courage of Being Disliked, and everyone kind of has this sense of like their reputation needs to be held in high regard. Anyway, but in a general sense, they don't really care about what other people are doing. They care about what's best
Hmm.
for them. Yeah. And then the emotions, which goes on to your other one, is around like, I think they more realize from problem perspective that their emotions are getting the better of them. Yeah. And
Right.
I was working with a client yesterday who's ultra successful, doing really well. She's a specialist in a medical field. You know, she's earning combined household of about, I think it was like $2.2 million. Okay. They've got everything, car, a lot of holidays, this, that, everything you can imagine from a money perspective that money can buy, they've got. Okay. Now,
Sure.
but she was aware that her finances weren't optimized because she didn't have the time to focus on. She knew that she was making dumb decisions with her money. You know,
Right.
she went to go buy a car for $75,000, and because the warranty issue, or there was a warranty issue that was too much of a hassle for her, that she paid $110,000 because she couldn't be bothered for a different car. Yeah, and so it's interesting because I think what I'm trying to more get at is the people who end up becoming successful in working with their money and getting to where they knew understand those three things and then try to mitigate those three things. And I think that's what, from what I'm listening from you and hearing, that's what I'm seeing that's occurring. Now, you might want to elaborate on that, but that's what I'm seeing in the other camp, which is the ones that actually do execute and make some serious impact on their lives.
Mm. It's interesting. And look, a lot of people, uh, I mentioned what I do is about the kind of the conscious and the unconscious drivers of people's decisions. Right? The unconscious one is is the most interesting bit to me, right? Because what are the things that would drive you, John, or me waking up today that I don't know are driving me? And that's a bizarre thought, right? What do you mean I don't know what what's motivating me or what's stopping me from doing stuff? And the reason we don't know, I'll come back to kind of that example. The reason we don't know is often because we do this thing called post-rationalizing, right? If you say to me, Phil, why did you buy that? Oh, we don't have a fancy car and stuff, but if I certainly did back in the day. Why did you buy that car? I could have given you 101 reasons that weren't. I want to feel good about myself. I want other people to think that I that I look good when I'm driving around,
That
and
I made
all
it.
of all of those reasons, and that maybe that's me masking the real reason, but also this post rationalization. We believe those things. Yeah, I might believe that fuel efficiency is actually the reason I'm buying this, and it was a good lease deal, and it was a good whatever. I can post rationalize, say why did I make that decision? So the way that these unconscious drivers are identified are often kind of experiments where people don't know they're in a condition. You look at how people respond to one choice versus another one, and you can kind of control things very closely. But in day-to-day life, we can't pick out those things, right? On a particular decision, you can't say, why did you really make that decision there? So coming back to the people who do these things well, who address those emotional effort and economic tethers, and the ones who don't, the person there, for example, how motivated are they really right now? Let's talk about the motivation part of that balloon now. So how motivated are they really right now to do something? Because the other thing that feeds into motivation is urgency, right? To your point there, do I go to the gym today? Oh, not today, but I will tomorrow. Definitely tomorrow. Urgency doesn't it isn't there for me. If I'm not going today, it doesn't feel urgent. If the house was on fire, I could urgently get out. I'd urgently jump out of bed. So that urgency is essential for people to take action there and then, and to prioritize action over the million and one other things they could be doing with their lives right now. And I say we as individuals often come at this from the logical point of view, right? If you're thinking, why wouldn't somebody sort out the lease on their car and save them money? Why wouldn't they sort out their mortgage rate? Why wouldn't they take out, protection policies, whatever that might look like? Logic doesn't win that argument. Right, the old adage would all be billionaires of six packs if logic and and knowing what to do were the only things. So it's the emotions that win that argument. And if we can tap into, for that person or that person, what are the things that really matter to them and feel salient? I really strike a chord with them and feel urgent to them and feel important to them right now. That's what we need to do to make sure that motivation is honed in like a magnifying glass. Really, you've got this bright sun that's there in the background, that motivation. And to my point earlier, it's rarely a lack of motivation in a broad sense that's an issue, but the issue is often we don't hold the magnifying glass right. We're not shining at the point where we can focus that motivation into action. And that's why, when I hear someone say, I'll get round to it, or actually, I've been thinking about this for 5 years, my next question is, okay, and what has stopped you during those 5 years? There's an assumption when someone says that, and I would always assume this, right? Oh, they've been thinking about it for 5 years, but now they've come and said, "Oh, but now I'm ready to address it." 5 years later, you think, okay, now it's been 10 years, and actually I was I was a bit misguided. You didn't address it. I'm sure you've seen this, John. So the question on my mind is, okay, what's held you back from doing that 5 years ago? What's changed to why you're coming to me now? What do we need to think about? What are the things that we need to think about to make sure it's not another 5 years and we can address this?
And it was interesting you say this because I recently just came up because I like using real life examples because they obviously have to relate to someone. But I had someone that reached out to me back in 2012. We're recording this in 2025. So 13 years, and he still had my kind of original proposal from 13 years ago. And I think from tongue in cheek, he goes, "Oh, are you still going to honor it?" I said, I had a bit of a laugh with him. But anyway, but his wife was, stirring him up, like, look how, but in, like stirring up, but obviously a little bit of, reality to it. Like they were absolutely blown away by what we, are able to achieve with them now. And, it was, you could see clearly on them face, and what she was saying was like, look at the time we've lost.
Right.
Now there was an urgency because there was probably 13 years of pestering. He reckons that he did the longest interrogation of a professional of 13 years trying to suss out if I was legit. And I said, yeah, or real. But you know, that urgency thing you talk about, it's around, for me, how much do you really want it? Like how much do you really want it? And people can say, I want to be financially free. Sure. Do you really want it? Do you want to be fit and have a six pack? I can kind of say, Phil, that I do, but I'm having my chocolate here and there. I'm
Yeah,
not
sure.
running every day. I like to have it, but I don't really want it. Yeah, let's be honest. Because if I really
Yeah.
wanted it, it's one of the sayings then probably in your game. Like it's amazing how many things you can do if you fully put your mind towards something. Yeah, and put all your energy towards something. So I am seeing a lot of people that I think need to look at themselves in the mirror and be honest if they truly want it, because the ones who truly want it are addressing all those three areas and really pushing kind of to that next level. Um,
Mhm.
I just want to kind of talk about something that, me and you have talked about is there's kind of, in some ways, there's a lot of people who have different mindsets and different beliefs, and this probably goes into the
Mhm.
unconscious area. And a lot of people we speak to kind of come from two different camps, but you kind of elaborated on these camps a little bit more because it's a bit more multi-dimensional, which I wanted to talk about today. And the typical one that people hear is that there's kind of two mindsets. Okay, one mindset being that kind of saver, scarcity mindset. These guys usually kind of overthink it. They really struggle to take on risk. They're really in the version of like, I will save my way to freedom. Yeah. And preserve, 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 preserve. And sometimes it's really hard for these people to kind of break through these invisible ceilings that are holding them back because it's
Yeah.
generational. And I've talked about on this podcast before, I'm Maltese. My grandparents and parents were born in Malta, bombed by the Nazis for 4 years. There's this kind of generational trauma. And I've had a psychotherapist on before talking about how trauma has an impact on your financial decisions. And we explored that as
Hmm.
well. But then there's a second camp, which is what like we often refer to as the spenders. Yeah. And these spenders, they make really, really good sums of money, but as quick as they make it, they spend it. Some people are earning seven, eight, $900,000 a year in some cases, and there's more going out than going in. And we find with these people, they really are acting before they think. You often hear them say, like, oh, I shouldn't have bought that investment property then. And there's this a little bit of like just boom, 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 and then think. And reality is that these people, yes, they've got some mindset blocks which we'll elaborate on and some invisible ceilings, but for us, it's around creating systems and processes to kind of keep their money away from them, and then once we've done that, starts to work on the behavioral kind of changes along the way. So like fix and then work on the long term. And I do find that camp does really, really well once they get these systems in place and start to
Right.
really point their money to purpose. Yeah. Whereas the other kind of scarcities camp, it's sometimes a little bit of a harder grind. Yeah. Because of they're
Mm.
focusing on the things we were talking about before. But I want to kind of elaborate because it's a little bit more, there's a bit more dimensions to this. And I know that you were talking to me about the promoter and the preventer.
Prevention.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
preventer. So, what do you maybe see first and foremost with that saver scarcity mindset and that kind of spender
Mm.
mindset, and then how does that kind of promoter prevention intertwine within that?
Yeah. Interesting question. And yeah, and that's a very kind of clear cut thing to see in a lot of people, right? We're talking about unconscious and conscious. That's often a very, if someone will say, I'm a saver or I'm a spender. That's something people are pretty familiar with themselves about often. Doesn't mean we can easily address those things, but we're at least, able to reflect on them. Um, uh, that there's one other thing I'd touch on based on what you said, which is impulsivity as well. That's slightly different. I'll talk about promotion and prevention. Impulsivity, making those rash decisions, someone who potentially regrets those decisions afterwards. That is, I'd say, a separate thing. People can be impulsive around different types of decisions. But that for me, the reason I'm so interested to pick up on that as well, that for me is one of the biggest things a financial planner, financial advisor can help with because again, people know they're impulsive, right? And it's like, I need my financial planner to be the the kind of the restraint on me from making these decisions. It's not about I need them to motivate and get me to do the stuff, all the things we were saying earlier, I need them to get me to go to the gym. It's like I need them to take away the ice cream bucket in the freezer or whatever. And that's often that has a huge impact. And it's often one where you see the quickest impact, I think, in my experience, from advice as well, because they know what needs to be done. They need someone to support them through that. So I love seeing those sorts of clients who have that, that ability to reflect and say, look, help me stop doing rash things around my money. That's really nice to see.
And we say, just to like elaborate, like the three biggest things that we're going to work with you on, Mr. or Mrs. Client, is one, no donations to the tax office. Two, no unnecessary middleman between you and your money. Okay, to refer to things like fees and interest that's unnecessary. And the third one is to stop you from making stupid decisions with your money. Yeah. And when you talk about stupid decisions with your money, there's also around looking around corners you can't see. Yeah. And
Hmm.
it's those two last ones that we're talking about today. And if you actually look at all the data, all the research, all the whatever, the biggest value in a advice relationship is in those. Yeah. The tax efficiencies and the fee efficiencies and all of that, they're great, and they need to have it happen because they're going to stop you from achieving your goals sooner than you want them to be. But you make some really dumb, silly decisions, and you're not going back like 6 months on your journey. You're going back 6 years or 16 years. Yeah. So definitely resonate with that. But
Mm.
yeah, going back to obviously yeah, some of the unconscious decisions.
Yeah. So I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but also I love the way you're describing those three things, John. Yeah, that's why you're sitting where you are and you build a successful business. I think that resonates with people, right? Particularly the looking around the corner stuff of what's coming. Having a partner to help them with that is hugely powerful. So thinking about back to promotion and prevention, these different motivational states, let's call them. Um, you described as kind of spender and saver, but which is often the case. What motivational state is, and people can move between these states, right? They tend to have what we call a chronic state, i.e., my kind of default setting, and then a situational state. So right now, this second for this decision, what's my setting? And promotion tends to look like getting pleasure through progress and feeling pain through a lack of progress. So if we think pain is this kind of base level where I'm not doing anything, I'm not growing, I'm not changing, I'm not growing my assets, I'm not progressing in my career, I'm not developing socially, wherever that might apply to, I'm not making progress. For a prevention person, the other side of the coin, pleasure is is avoiding loss and pain is losing. So the base level for a promotion person doesn't feel great because they want to be progressing. The base level for a prevention person does feel great because they're interested in protecting and in security versus a promotion person who's interested in progressing. And you used the word freedom earlier. That freedom for them might look like the ability to live this aspirational life and to buy these things or to spend more time with their family or to do more XYZ. Freedom for a prevention person might look like freedom from this constant concern in my head that will we be able to pay the mortgage? Will I, even though I know John's told me, look, I've got $1 million in the bank, but I've got this 500k mortgage still that feels a bit horrible because even though I know I've got money, logically I know I've got money to cover it. As a very prevention focused person, I really care about security, and that constant kind of pressure of potential loss is weighing on me. If we think about back to the earlier discussion around urgency and taking action and doing the right things, clearly we need to tap into what's motivating people. Right? That motivation's already there. But if you say to someone, if it was all about the numbers, right, we can grow your wealth. We can we can make you more efficient through tax and investing and fees and whatnot. That means a very different thing to a promotion versus a prevention person. And you hear a lot of this when I'm speaking to individuals. You hear a lot. You get real telltale signs of this through the words they use. Right? And even one just then I slipped in the word growth. Grow your portfolio. Are you growing a portfolio to try and beat inflation, or are you protecting against inflation, and you're avoiding the real value of their money eroding for inflation? And you can think about how this is worded, and they sound like real subtleties, and they are, but they're hugely powerful in terms of striking a chord with the person who they apply to. And I see this on websites and things for financial planners, for example. If people are talking about living their ideal lifestyle in retirement and these aspirational imagery, someone sailing on the boat and all this kind of stuff, well, that clearly applies to someone who's more promotion focused. If there's a picture of someone with their grandkids and they're saying, secure, make sure you don't run out of money in retirement and secure your family's future, clearly that's for a more prevention focused person at that point in time. So it makes sense for financial brands to use that knowledge, but also if we're to help people make better financial decisions, you need to tap into that. Otherwise, every message you're giving a client or everything you're hearing, there's just a disconnect, right? And if they're
And
thinking,
that's
look,
and sorry to interrupt, and from
yeah,
an
no, please do.
and from an individual's perspective, if they're not receiving this communication or this messaging, they're not acting on the feeling that they're having. Does that make sense, everyone? So
Yes,
like,
yeah.
it's just not like the output from like the financial services providers or whatever. It's also the input from the actual person to actually making them take action. And I'm going to apply this literally today, this morning. Okay, so a client referred their parents. Phil, we're doing the intergenerational thing, but the opposite way around.
Mhm.
Kids are referring their parents, not the opposite
Yeah.
way. Anyway, and they openly told me, they walked into the room. The guy is from Scottish heritage. He kind of comes in, sits down, him and his wife, and he goes, I'm a very conservative person. First thing, like pretty much sitting down, very conservative person. And I've had enough of my job. I travel 45 minutes, 50 minutes away. I'm done. And you can kind of see that he was finished in his career. He's 60, call it 62. Okay, completely done. And he says to me, before we get started, this is the way that I invest my money. This is the way that I did it. And he's just blurting out what he's been doing. But in reality, he's just talking about his frustrations, because really what he's saying is like, I'm coming here because I need help. This is all the problems, but he kind of couldn't communicate it in like the language he could communicate, was just, these are all my errors. Yeah.
Right.
And what was very interesting was, he then said to me, John, I've met with 2 financial advisors before you. You're the third one. And for those who don't know this about me, my major at university is financial risk management. If you kind of said to me, my speciality, it's risk. Manage the risks, the returns will speak for themselves. Manage risk. And just naturally, this is not kind of doing anything. This is just the person I am. I talk about how we can apply the rules of like Warren Buffett, which is rule number 1, don't lose money. Rule number 2, don't forget rule number 1. And then obviously be greedy when people are fearful. And I went into kind of these philosophies. And the first 45 minutes of probably an hour and a half session was around philosophies, risk management. He talked about, first thing he was talking about was return. And I'm like, take your eyes away from return, focus on risk. And I did all of this. And there was a gap that needed to be done. They needed $80,000 a year to be able to live in retirement. Yeah. And by the time I went through all of the risk mitigation strategies, and then at the end of the risk mitigation strategies in our bucketing strategy, showed him that he was $4,000 a year in passive income away from actually being able to retire in perpetuity. Now, just so you can understand, $4,000, we're literally talking about a portfolio in capital value being worth about 2% more, needs to be about 2% in value more to be able to dictate that income. By the end of it, a guy that walked in with kind of crossed in shoulders like this, and I'm telling you, and this is all the I've done wrong, but you tell me why you're better than all the other financial advisors. And remember, he told me that he was very conservative at the time. And the wife who was sitting there felt like it got dragged along to each of these meetings. Yeah. By the end of the conversation was just like, okay, what's next? What do we need to do? Like, they've obviously seen 2 other financial. Okay. So like Phil was saying before, there was a sense of urgency now. They also saw, from my opinion, how close they are from achieving the goal that they've been working to. And they told me about this, where they started from nothing and have been working towards that for the last 40 years. Yeah, put it right in front of them, and they're this far away. And so that sense of I wanted to do that. The second thing was when we talk about promotion and we talk about prevention, literally 3/4 of the conversation was talking to the language that Phil was talking about. It wasn't about them growing their portfolio to heights that they've never seen before and blah, blah, blah. It was, we've worked so hard, we don't want to lose it all. And when I turn off the tap and no longer work anymore, I'm not going back to work. So my whole messaging was focused around the prevention talk, but ultimately it was for them to be in a better position and work with a professional to take action and then impactfully change their financial future. And why am I kind of using client? Because there's a lot of people that are in that camp. We just spoke about it before. Yeah. We talk about how many times these people have tried to see financial advisors, 2 times, but how long has he been? And so then he goes and DIYs, and then he openly admitted to all the mistakes that he had. And Phil, you could probably rip into that scenario from whatever, but you can see how these kind of, probably a scarcity / prevention mindset Now they're 61, 62. Didn't have the opportunity to ask the question, but I'm sure in my next meeting that I have with them, if I ask them like, you reckon it would have been better off for you to see me 10 years ago? They would have said, oh, John, we wish we met you 10 years ago. You know what I mean? But what do you take out of that, Phil? Like, obviously, hearing that story.
Yeah, I'm smiling because it's just this is why I do what I do, right? And I'm sure why you
Mm.
do what you do. It's just fascinating knowing each person's story, their own kind of financial journey, for want of a better word, that they've been on, has resulted in them having being in this situation and having these thoughts and feelings around money. One of the interesting things that you sort of briefly touched on there as well is couples as well, right? You've got the husband and wife, I think you said, sitting there. Husband doing lots of the talking around, I'm conservative, I think to your words. If it's anything like a lot of the situations, not all of them, but a lot of situations I've seen in, the wife tends to be quite silent in those situations. The husband's often quite kind of dominating that conversation. But chances are they're a decision-making couple. When they go away, they'll make that decision together, or at least be heavily influenced by each other in that decision. And so, firstly, I think that's the thing that really interests me, that stands out, is how those decision-making dynamics work. And I don't want to labor about promotion and prevention, but you might have somebody who's two people who are motivated in completely different ways here. And who do we talk to? Yeah, in terms of the language we use and what we're trying to do. Well, clearly we need to talk with both people and understand both people and figure that out. So I think that's always fascinating, like couple dynamics around money.
And it's very interesting. I kind of use this. I kind of say sometimes couples are like magnets. Okay, so let's say if we use the kind of scarcity and the side of the saver and the spender mindset, it's very often in couples that they're actually two different mindsets when it comes to money. Okay, well, that's what I've found in my samples.
Hmm.
That you'll have some that's more of a saver and the other one's more of a spender. And in those scenarios, they actually are like two magnets. They're trying to draw each other, like they're actually trying to pull each other together. Okay,
Mm.
trying to. Okay, and they end up over time getting into a scenario where one of those magnets was stronger and brought the other person closer to that side. Okay. Now, ideally, with us, what we try and do is then get you into that middle position, which is what we call that realist, where you've got attributes of being thinking before you act in regards to what kind of comes from a saver and a scarcity, not the act and then think. Okay. But you've
Hmm.
also got from the spender attribute the being able to live a fulfilled life. And, I can't say this often enough. It's not just about becoming financially free and independent. It's also about living a very fulfilling life. Yeah. You don't want to
Hmm.
be 85 years old looking back at your life and going, oh, that was miserable, but I'm worth 50 million bucks. Like, there's no point of having the 50 million. You should have lived a fulfilled life and obviously had some financial security along the way. That obviously helps. So you've got these two couples, sometimes two couples having the same. But if you go to like ones that are in the same camp, that's where some of the big issues lie. Okay. And what I mean by
Mm.
that is around there's some couples that will come and they're both savers. Like they can't even get over the hurdle of the economics around just paying for a financial advisor. There's not one person giving the rationale usually to say, oh, they need to see it. It's just not even happening. It's DIY, DIY, DIY. Yeah, I want to become a Wimbledon tennis champion. Don't worry about Roger Federer. I'm going to go on YouTube and learn how to be that. You get me what I
Right.
mean, yeah. But then you've got the other aspect, which is then you say you've got two savers, yeah. Sorry, two spenders, and they're YOLO, mate. We
Mm.
just got a client. They're earning about $480,000 a year. And when I say just got them, we've been working with them for about 12 months. But we're struggling at the moment to really break through. And I'm being obviously totally honest because these guys do not want to change their spending habits. But the ultimate thing is that, and I'm hoping that we break through. As you can see, we're not just being like this incremental change. It's like, can we just start doing small steps and then building? And Phil, we've talked about it before. It's not just shifting someone sometimes automatically from one side to the next. It's creating these incremental changes that hopefully over time can compound before you start making some transformative and really impactful changes. So we're trying
Mm.
with incremental, but it is bloody hard. Yeah, it is bloody
Yeah.
hard because you've got two magnets, as I put them, pushing them to the other way. Now, when you've then got that overlay of that prevention and that promoter motivations and what current state are they in when they're thinking that way, everyone who's watching and listening to this, can you see how much your behaviors is having an impact on the way that you think and interact with money? And, I'm very open in saying that the reason that why me and my wife have a financial advisor who's not just a normal financial advisor, but that can understand the behaviors and the emotions and the psychology around money is not to tell us the difference between one super fund and the other super fund or investment A versus investment B. I can assure you I know all of that stuff. Okay. But it's to make sure that we're completely aligned as a couple. Yeah. And I like the word aligned and in the right
Mm.
direction going together. Yeah. And that when emotions are driving, maybe on my side because work is really busy and or my wife is up late because she's not sleeping because of the little one and all of this stuff, that we continue to not pull on those bad tethers as you go by, that we're not focusing on the emotions. And that's even from someone who's been in the profession for 21 years. And my wife
Hmm.
studied as a psychologist. Like, we're aware of these things,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
couple dynamics just throws in a totally other new layer, but is something that people need to be aware of. Yeah,
Mm.
definitely.
Uh, Agreed. And one of the other things you mentioned around that couple who they're not going to have any more income, that scarcity mindset or scarcity concerns. You'll know this, John. I certainly experienced this when I left a nice, comfortable corporate job, steady income to set up my own business. You suddenly, even we had personal savings to enable that, but you suddenly switch on the clock, right? And you think, okay, God, there's nothing else coming in unless something changes. The default is zero coming into the bank account each month. And that just firstly can shift you straight from a promotion to a prevention mindset. Someone who has been in this state where they're a real go-getter, they're an entrepreneur, they're whatever. They sell their business and they might have, I don't know, $10 million. But if that tap switched off for the foreseeable future, it's hard not to think about the scarcity element, regardless of how big that number is, right? It's a mindset thing. You use the word mindset. It's a mindset thing. It's not a. It can't be measured in pound in dollars and cents. It can only be measured in how someone's feeling, and that can feel really uncomfortable, right? When you think, no, I'm this person who's always trying to do better, trying to do more and progress, and then suddenly this thing happens, retirement, selling a business, whatever it might be, and that switch flicks, and they need to understand, okay, well, here's what's important to me now, and here are these new things that I'm worried about that I wasn't before. And a good advisor understands that as well, right, and can coach people through it. And so, look,
That's
maybe
what, and
let's.
that's what differentiates. Let's be honest, Phil. Like, from someone who's seen a lot of financial advisors around the world, yeah, and for me too, the biggest differentiator, I believe, between an average advisor, yeah, and a great one. That kind of that level of that technical acumen is kind of here and average, and everyone should know that to have a ticket to the game. But your
Mhm.
ability to help your clients break through these invisible ceilings and be able to kind of create new habits and new behaviors and become the person that needs to become to live that fulfilling life. That's what
Mhm.
it's all about. And that's what Thriving Wealth was created. And obviously, we've jammed in regards to what Thriving Wealth does and why we're leading the curve in regards to a lot of this. But it's clearly the differential in regards to it. And for people like that, like I said, that are watching and listening, you can also see why me and Phil are so obsessed with it, because we
Yeah.
realize that this is the change, this is the transformation, this is the one that's really moving the dial. And it's around, we're using platforms like this to be able to kind of not tell you around these kind of get rich quick schemes where people are telling you to buy this off market property and these certain shares that are going to go bang and turn you. The reality is if you can master this is the one that's going to create the most amount of change and the most amount of transformations for you. And that's what I'm absolutely obsessed about. That's why I've kind of been really kind of head down, bum up, getting absolutely even deeper into rabbit holes in regards to this stuff, because this is ultimately what's making the difference. And Phil, before I do forget, is around another one that I see that's very common is, and this kind of leads into maybe the promoter side. So let's just assume that you've got this client, okay, that has got everything sorted. So they've got their cash
Mhm.
flow sorted, they've got their investment sorted, they've got the superannuation sorted, they've got their life insurance, their estate, everything's ticked off. And To be honest with you, we've been working with an advisor for 2 to 3 years and everything's sorted. They get to the point where everything's sorted, but they now feel like it's done and I don't
Right.
need an advisor anymore. Yeah. Obviously, it depends on the mindset and all of that stuff, but what's usually happening in that scenario where it's
Mm.
complete?
Yeah, interesting question, and common, right? A few years into a relationship, um, people often sense that. I, the trouble often comes down to how complete is measured, and inherently, in what you just said, complete is measured in pure financial terms. Right, you already saved me tax because you restructured my portfolio and you did, whatever. All these things. I'm now invested in this stuff. Actually, you've told me don't touch it, for at least a few years. So you're actually telling me not to do anything around that. So if we're measuring complete by purely the financial stuff, it's difficult to understand. That there's the behavioral element you've mentioned already, which is, and the horizon scanning element, right? When Trump does something, I haven't looked at the news this morning, but when I do, something will come up. Something will have
Yeah. Are we
changed
in
in the
war? Are
world.
we out of war? Are
It,
someone.
it, it- Something will have changed in the world overnight, right? And it might often be that you don't react to that. But in those 1 in 100 moments where something might change, you probably want someone on your side to help you through that. And those moments, historically as well, are the ones that have the biggest impact on people, where there is either keeping them on the right track and not making an impulsive change, particularly if someone who knows they're impulsive. You still need to maintain a relationship with an advisor to help get that benefit. Or where there is occasional change, it might be some kind of restructure. It's those moments you can't measure the value of financial advice from amount of work done. It's from impact. The second part on impact is all the first stuff I said is in relation to measuring it through financials. And that's a fundamental question, right? The best financial advisors know that this idea, this thing we made up as humans called money, isn't the end, right? That's not the end point to where we're getting. And the best clients, I'm sure, it'd be great to get your thoughts on this, John, but the best clients that I've seen are the ones who get that as well, right? They know that actually the money there is a vehicle to get them to that sense of freedom, to security about their family, to providing a legacy, to making an impact with on the planet, on the people around them, whatever that looks like, is a vehicle. If then the end point is all of those other things I've just mentioned that aren't just the money, well, that never stops, right? So if the expectation of how I'm going to judge the value of my financial advisor is all of those things, well, then there isn't a question, right? We still want to pursue freedom. What does freedom mean now? Because your life has changed. You've now got grandkids that you didn't have. So now the idea of freedom has changed for you. Your ambitions, your goals, what the next 5 years looks like. Oh, there's sickness in the family. Okay, well let's go back to the security bit now. You've had a sudden shift. That's a constant flow, a constant conversation in that dynamic. So the financial bit, sure, there are some things that once they're done, and particularly if you say don't touch it again, that as an end raises the question, okay, what do we do now? But that as purely a vehicle to get to the important stuff, that's what needs to be a conversation on repeat with clients. Excuse me, and something that's constantly in flux as well, right? If that makes sense.
It does definitely make sense, and I think it's the attribute of once everything's complete, is it really complete? And it's around like, how can I say it? If you can imagine just like a glass of water, yeah. When you first came, there's actually no glass in the water, like no water in the glass. Sorry, yeah. Literally, the glass is fallen over. The advisor puts the glass back up, then starts filling the glass, and all of a sudden you've got water. However, things like events, economic events, try and move that water. Water kind of comes out. It needs to be kind of top back up.
Mm-hmm.
But also the things that are filling up your cup changes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So as you spoke about before, it might be for me right now, like seeing my kids play football or soccer. Yeah. I get after this podcast, I'm going to go run down. I'm going to go watch my boys. They're going to go play. Just seeing them develop, seeing them really love their life and being able to enjoy it. And with my little one, he's starting to learn how to walk. Like that really makes me fulfilled. And me being able to have the opportunity, the option to be able to kind of take that time to go spend with my children and not miss a moment. Wow, that's impactful. But
Mm-hmm.
they're going to grow up. And then those moments are going to change, and I might, with my wife, start to really get a travel bug. And then all of a sudden I'm backpacking the Himalayas. And that's what makes that's what makes me fulfilled. And now obviously money is going to help me to be, help me to enable that to happen. So it's around how does my financial plan pointing me to the purpose. Yeah. And then I constantly say to people, like, if you encapsulate that all into like, what I believe that most people are really aiming for as their North Star, I've found over the last 20 years, it's to spend time with the people that you love. Okay. So money needs to enable that to happen, or to do much more with your time in the things that you love doing. So it's either doing what you love, spending time with the ones you love. Okay. Now, along the way, life changes. Kids grow up, this, that, who you love. And I'm not trying to get fluffy here in regards to what I'm talking. Like, obviously, you love your family, but, it might be the friendships that you've got. You want to kind of, really want to spend time with those. Or it might be your parents that are aging and that you want to really spend time with them because you think that death is near. And then people start to kind of go, when I have this talk, feel a little bit, they're like, but aren't you just a financial advisor? Aren't you just telling me which super fund or which retirement account or which. Yeah, but that's what Phil just said before, that the best financial advisors realize that that's actually not what we're talking about here. Yeah. We're talking about that bigger picture. And so when clients who are the best are the ones who realize that too. They realize that my investments, my debt structures, my cash flow systems, all of that stuff needs to be pointing in the direction to make me more fulfilled in life. Yeah. And they judge the relationship on the progress towards their goals, both financial and non-financial, but ultimately to what makes them truly fulfilled. So that if they are on their deathbed, hopefully very old in age, okay, they don't sit in their deathbed and go, I wish I lived life differently. And where this started to really come from, Phil, for me as well, too, is I used to say, like, imagine speaking to someone on their deathbed and saying, if you could change life, what would you change? Like, what would you? I don't think anyone would say to me, I wish I had more money. They would always say, like, obviously, they would say, how money would have helped if they were in a scarcity kind of arrangement, that money would help and make me more secure. So I'll put a caveat towards that. But it's more around like, let's just imagine you're worth 10 mil. I don't think I'm going to get like, 12 mil would have done it for me. I wish I earned an extra 2 mil. It would have been usually like, I wish I spent more time with my son when he was growing up. Yeah. And I just had a bit more of a stronger connection. Or before my mum passed away, I felt like I didn't see her enough. Or, I always wanted to go to Machu Picchu. It was when I was a kid, but I never had the opportunity because my health got the better of me when in my old age, when I thought I was going to, because I was working too hard when I was young and not being able to do that. It's more living in that. So if you think about that moment, I believe that's the most purest moment about what we're trying to do here, which is create a life that is maximized. And sometimes it takes us to look into those moments to then look back. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing in regards to that level where we have to work with these people, that when they think it's complete, is around saying, okay, well, now that their finances are sorted and optimized, we still need to review those. We still need to keep them humming because, they still need to be maintained, okay, for the car to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's levels. Yeah. There's this kind of foundational level. Then there's this more advanced level. And then there's this kind of expert level. And I believe that the advanced level, people often think about this as like, I need to take on more risk. I need to have more complexity when it comes to my finances. I
Right.
need to like they often refer to the financial strategies need to being advanced rather than who they need to become to actually unlock that level. Yeah.
Mm.
And it's around like if you think about it, if I said to most people, like, what do you need to do to earn $1 million a year? Most people would say that's never going to happen.
Right.
But we just talked about very, very earlier on, whatever you put your mind to, in most cases, you're able to achieve. And if you really want it, you can make that happen. And I would say that the people that are in expert, not even advanced, in expert, kind of reverse engineer that process. They kind of say, okay, well, what do I need to do now? I'm earning $250,000 a year. Okay, cool. I want to earn $1 million a year. Let's reverse engineer the plan of what needs to happen. Let's create a 10-year thing. I need to upskill myself in these areas. I need to do. Now, the elevation of income, which is a part of our wealth creation framework, is a key pillar to advancing your ability to be financially free. But yet, that's an advanced strategy, is the ability for you to make more income. But yet, people don't focus on it. And I'll be frank, advisors don't even talk about it. Yeah. But
Interesting.
we're working with people around, okay, well, while you're here, what's stopping you from getting to that next stage? And we find that that is a great success to then start to create income targets for yourself. Yeah. To say, okay, well, now how can we keep you accountable to get to that income target? And then obviously honing in on some of the real behavioral stuff that now we can identify now that we've got some clarity on the mess. Yeah. Now that the
Mm.
cup's been stable for a while and we can kind of see through the cup because the water's not moving, what's really in the cup? Oh, yeah, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing this, you're doing that. And then we start to do it. Now, the thing is, Phil, is when people get to that stage, we do it well, and probably 9 out of 10 go, yeah, I want to go to advanced mode. But then there's this other thing again, which happens, which is around, no, 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 no. I just came to you to get the foundations. I'm
Hmm.
happy. And they become complacent. And I think if we talk about the percentage of people who are ultimately successful, both be in business, in sport, in whatever, it's the danger area. Yeah. It's the
Mm.
danger area to where flying on the aeroplane, there's been no turbulence. Oh, the pilot got us up here. We just autopilot it down. Let's fly the pilot out. Yeah. You can see how this happens psychologically, don't you?
I can, and I love the analogy as well. I think it's spot on the kind of autopilot one. The turkey feels most comfortable Christmas Eve when he's been fattened up for a year and thinks life is good. Everything's going well, and then Christmas Day comes, and that was that. I think complacency can get you to some tricky situations sometimes. And I would go back um, to what's the end goal, right? And I think clearly, John, you and your clients, and the reason we started chatting is, I can clearly see even from all the way over here, the other side of the world, clearly see the good work you're doing and how you're focusing on the important stuff that matters, right? But lots of people don't. And they then see that plane journey, for that analogy, as getting up in the air, as keeping altitude. They haven't thought, right, well, the destination is this ever moving thing for starters, and also um, it sort of doesn't matter where we are right now in that destination. You're not engaging me to get you up in the air. You're engaging me as a thought partner, as a financial coach in some respects, I mean, from a behavioral perspective, as obviously a regulated advisor who's going to help you do the stuff as well and implement the right things. But you're not engaging me in kind of one facet of this, a transactional person that's going to get you up and get you off the ground and then say, see you later. Some people want that, or some people think they want that, at least in the early stages. It doesn't strike me as what you do. What you do is around, right, the destination we're trying to get to is ever moving destination. That's what we're focusing on. And it's hard to change someone's perspective on that. Look, you need to have this end goal in sight, right? Some people just want to get off the ground, or at least they think they just want to get the plane off the ground, and then things are done. One thing I would say is when we think about behavior, like changing behavior, and that's everything we're talking about, right? How do we change people's financial behaviors, the things they do, the way they think about money, etc.? It's easy to think about behavior as this spectrum of stuff, right? You start and you do some things and then you become fit. You start and you do some things and you become rich, you become healthy, whatever that might look like. What tends to happen is we go in these kind of cycles, right? Think of it as a spiral. You go through some stages to create the first behavior. That first behavior for a new client might be speaking to an advisor. So they might go through a process where they think something's happened in my life. Oh, I'm now thinking about speaking to an advisor. Okay, I'm now preparing the stuff I need to speak to them. I think it's probably the right thing to do. I'm now taking action. I'm actually turning up to a meeting. And then they get into this kind of maintenance phase where they're ready for the next behavior and they go around the cycle again. That next behavior might be, right, now I'm ready to review the stuff they've sent me. 6 months later, maybe they're not ready for the next cycle, but then they say, yeah, I'm going to actually formally engage with this advisor. They've still got God knows how many cycles to go to actually implement the advice, to actually open up more. But if we think about behavior as this kind of linear thing getting from A to B, well, it doesn't really align with all the complexity of what's driving people. If we think about it in these spirals, if we can get people through those early stages, that provides a great foundation for all the stuff we've spoken about, to live a fulfilling life, to have financial freedom, financial security, etc. But you need to get them through these early stages in any case. And sometimes the ideal client would turn up on a doorstep and say, right, I need a sense of financial freedom. And I know money's not, the money's not the destination, but I want you to help me with that and have a deep conversation with my wife and I around our financial futures. That rarely happens, right? If we can get people through even the transactional bits to start with, then they start to get an identity as someone who is taking action around money. They're no longer the avoider who came to you in 2012, 2013 and said, I think I need some help. They're now somebody who's, yeah, I take advice. I'm taking action around my money. And it gives them a
I'm not the
platform.
person who wants to be financially fit. I am the person who's financially, and
So
it's and
how
it's
do you become a runner? You start running, right? And that's the difference. You might not be the best runner in the world, but runners run. Somebody who is financially responsible does things with their money. They reflect it, they make decisions, they speak to people. And if we can start people running over, they may not be they may not feel like a runner overnight. They may not be a great runner overnight, but they've started running. They're on that cycle. And often that's the role of good advice is getting people going in the right direction, right? And getting momentum.
100%. Phil, I'm going to have to start wrapping things up because I've got to be the good dad and watch my sons play soccer. But yeah, it's been an absolutely amazing chat, and I reckon there's someone who's opened the door. So I reckon there's a young one waiting for dad to come see them
I
as well
think
too on your
me being
side.
a good dad is my kids have woken up and they're ready for some play before nursery. So that's my
Yeah,
job now.
awesome. But mate, I could have talked about this to the forever. So I think we might need to pick up a part two and to start getting deep into like identity, and it's very important, everyone. That today's session's really kind of with Phil has been around the world of behavior and how much that has an impact on your decisions, and how as an advisor that kind of interlinks to kind of enhancing those behavioral strengths, but also identifies those behavioral weaknesses and being able to kind of work on them to really create that impact that me and Phil are really obsessed about, and those transformative experience to make you not only more financially independent or just, but also to make you more fulfilled as well too. So
Mhm.
hopefully you really love this podcast. I have. Phil, thank you very much. For those who want to know more about Dr. Phil Courtenay, jump onto Humans and Money. You'll be able to, I think if you just type in Dr. Philip Courtenay, Humans and Money, you'll see that he's all over the internet. I think, mate, your marketing's doing well, but it's been really great to have you on, and thank you again, mate.
Awesome. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me, John.